Well, hi, everybody. It's another Conversations With. And I'm always reminded of Mr. Ed, the talking horse. And I'm reminded of an old saying, when you want to know what's going on, get right to the horse's mouth. Well, today I'm delighted to have with me Dr. Jeff Goldstein and his good pal Harry, who's with us. And we're going to be hearing from him in a few seconds. But this is an opportunity for folks in the area to really get it from the horse's mouth, because this is the gentleman who's proposing the cannabis property in the town of Charlton. So, Doctor, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
Why don't you tell us what's really going on?
Well, thank you. We appreciate the opportunity. There's many myths, misconceptions, and I think partially we have to take some responsibility. We haven't come out and done a very good job of informing the community about the project and what we're doing. So part of the purpose for being here, and thank you for having us, is so that we can tell people what the project is, what the impacts will be on the neighborhood, the town, and I think when people come to understand this project, I think we'll all recognize that this is actually a very good project for the town and for the community. I'd like to introduce Harry Van Doon, who I brought with me today. Harry's on his way back to Holland tonight. He came in for the planning board meeting yesterday, and also to do some design, help us with some design work. But Harry is a commercial horticulturist, and Harry has a very interesting background. He is from Holland, and for those of you that don't know, Holland has the largest horticultural industry in the world in terms of growing vegetables, flowers.
Holland bulbs.
Yes, bulbs. If you go to the supermarket, you'll see tomatoes coming from Holland.
Right.
Did anybody ever stop to think and wonder, why am I sitting in Massachusetts eating a tomato grown in a greenhouse in Holland? They actually had to grow that tomato and ship it here.
Yeah.
Why, it's kind of odd. Why can't we grow it here in Massachusetts? So, we had actually gone to Holland and viewed the commercial horticultural industry. It's a fascinating industry, and the Dutch approach, the Dutch have been involved and invested in agriculture, and indoor agriculture, and greenhouse agriculture for probably close to 100 years. They have literally hundreds of square miles of greenhouses. And when one goes to Holland, it's a very, very competitive industry. So, Holland has private enterprise, and all of these greenhouses are competing with each other. And they're trying to do two main things. One is improve the quality of what they're growing, and at the same time reduce the cost of what they're growing. And as a result, there's a tremendous economic cluster for horticulture. So when it came to growing cannabis, we had originally looked at the US industry. And what we found was that most of the cannabis growers in the US were not professionally trained horticulturists. They were individuals who came out of the illegal industry. They were hiding from, they were growing in the basement, the garage, took over the living room, and if they managed to successfully avoid the police and going to jail, or their competitors, which would be worse, they now became a successful horticulturist or a cannabis grower. But the truth is that their knowledge of commercial horticulture and economically sustainable and environmentally sustainable horticulture is very low. So the techniques that were developed were mainly based on small scale avoiding detection. What we did is we looked to the Netherlands and to look at commercial horticultural techniques and to adapt these techniques to growing cannabis. Essentially, we're growing cannabis like a tomato. Not much different. But we're not growing it like a tomato. We're growing it like cannabis using these techniques, and we've adapted these commercial, sustainable techniques so that we can grow cannabis on a large scale, here in Charlton. Harry's background and Harry's experience, Harry grew up in the commercial horticultural industry. His family owned greenhouses. His family were farmers.
Yep.
Harry was a farmer. He went to university. He trained in horticulture, indoor growing. The Dutch have a tremendous educational system. He has grown a variety of plants, and he became the chief horticulturist, the chief grower at a company called Bedrocan. Bedrocan was the first GMP, good manufacturing practice, GMP horticultural grow site for cannabis in Europe. So in Holland is very funny. You can buy cannabis, sell it, and smoke it, but you're not allowed to grow it.
Oh, okay.
So all these greenhouses, nobody's growing cannabis, at least not that we know about. But there was one legal grow site in Holland, and Harry was the chief horticulturist there.
So there is one place that's allowed.
And this was grown for the Dutch government.
Right.
And this is what was grown in pharmacies for patients. So all the medical cannabis, that's what Harry grew.
Okay.
So Bedrocan was bought by a company called, I forget, and eventually, a company called Tweed, and then a company called Canopy Growth, which is now one of the 4 or 5 large Canadian companies with $10 billion valuations. Harry left during this process, but many of the standard operating procedures, employee procedures, cultivation procedures that these companies are using were developed by Harry out of Bedrocan.
Wow.
So Harry has been serving as a consultant to the horticultural industry. He has clients, and he has agreed. We've met Harry about a year ago. We was introduced by the Dutch companies we were working with, because to develop these systems, and Harry has been working with us very closely. And in fact, Harry will be the chief horticulturist here in Charlton, right, of our facility.
So the bottom line becomes, we've heard all these exaggerations, and someone's going to be, well, they're going to have special lighting, and it's going to be like going to a night game at Fenway Park. And I looked at them, I said, what? And they said, yeah, well, it's going to be a lighting problem. Oh, so there's that issue. Then there's all kinds of issues about an odor. There's issues about traffic. And these are some of the things that the people locally are talking about. And so they may be what I call the meat and potatoes issues that need to be looked at. And so maybe you can shed some light on those.
Sure. So some of the common complaints we hear about are light, odor, noise, traffic, security, home values, community image, water resources. And these are all very reasonable concerns. I was talking at the planning board meeting last night with one of the abutters, and was complaining to me about some of these issues. And I said, I agree. And they said, how could you agree with me? We're on opposite sides. And I said, absolutely not. In fact, you and I are the same, and we share the same concerns. The person looked at me and said, how is that? And my answer was very simple. We don't want to have light pollution. We don't want to have sound pollution. We don't want to have an odor problem. We don't want to bother you. You don't want to be bothered. You don't want to be bothered. We don't want to bother you. To me, there seems to be a mutual interest, not opposite interests. So, in fact, there are very, very good solutions for all of these problems, which we plan on using. I can run through a few of them. So for light, for example. So yes, we do have lighting in the greenhouses, but the top of the greenhouse and the sides have a reflective curtain. So if we're growing at night, and we will be growing at night in some areas, if any light escapes, that's wasted money. That's a loss of revenue. Those are photons. That's light that instead of being directed back down to the plant is escaping. So we view that as a problem. We would want to fix that. It means the system is not working correctly. We would repair that. It means there's a tear or a leak.
Right.
We'd want to know about it immediately, thank the person who informed us, and we would repair that. But in fact, if you go by a greenhouse and you see a lot of light escaping at nighttime, then there's a problem there. They're actually wasting money. They're wasting revenue. It doesn't need to be that way. There are some older techniques that perhaps that might be the case, but not now. Odor, we have outstanding systems. We have environmental engineers that are addressing odor. Many greenhouses or locations that are cultivating are using outside air to ventilate. We're not. All of our air is inside and is recirculated. In fact, that's the most modern, the most up-to-date way to cultivate. Harry's can talk about, closed greenhouse systems that we're developing, but it's not just cannabis is being grown now in closed greenhouses. People are looking towards other plants such as tomatoes and cucumbers also in this type of closed environment. Any exhaust we do have would be clearly filtered. There's numerous solutions for managing the odor, and Harry actually has, I'd rather not talk about them, but we actually have several solutions that may even be patentable that are fairly novel for controlling the odor. So if there is an odor problem, we would want to know about it, and again, there's much we can do to prevent it. But much of it will be in the initial design.
Right.
Sound and noise, we have people working there. If the sound's a disturbance, it's going to be bothersome to people who are even on the site. That's the easiest and simplest thing to control. There's cogen, there's power plants. Can anybody hear the Millennium plant? That's 20, 30 times larger than anything we would be building. So, and yet that sound is well controlled.
Oh, yeah.
If they can control that,
Yeah.
then we should be able to control the sound.
Yeah.
So,
and in fact, I have a lot of plants in my yard, and a plant that grows very rarely makes any noise.
right, plants are very quiet.
Very quiet.
Yeah,
They
but,
don't say much.
but they're concerned about,
No, but I mean, it's one of
about
the things
fans
that,
and
that,
motors
that gets
and-
stretched out and say, well, there's going to be all kinds of noise. What kind of noise? What noise are you talking about? And they don't have an answer.
Right.
They just say it's noise. Well, what?
Charlton has very good regulations for all of these items. They have noise regulations. So if, the Board of Health, has rules and regulations, I'm not allowed to disturb the neighbors. If somebody comes, it's a very easy thing to measure. The unit of
Yeah.
noise is a decibel. And if we're exceeding a decibel limit at the edge of our property, we have to shut us down. Very simple.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be exceeding the noise, and noise is a very simple feature to control. We don't want there to be noise. We don't want anybody to hear us.
Right.
We don't want anybody to smell us. We don't want to have lights.
You just want to be nice and quiet and leave me alone.
And so I think we have mutual interests.
Well, that's great. I mean, and I think a lot of the things, and you summed it up. You don't want these things yourself. You don't want to cause problems. You want to. You got a plan. You've brought in experts like Harry, who do this for a living, and successfully. And so it's not as though you're just running blind down the road. That you've done a lot of work on this long before it even came to Charlton.
That's correct. We assemble a team of engineers. We have environmental engineers, power engineers, construction engineers, water management engineers, environmental specialists. We have horticultural specialists such as Harry. We have a fairly large and robust team of qualified experts to address each item so that what we build, and this is required, this is so that we know that what we build will work and will not be a detriment to the community. But let's talk about the positives. So assuming we can control and minimize the impacts to the neighbors, and so that the neighbors don't suffer harm. And again, that's very, very important to me. Both as a physician, one of the first things we learn is do no harm.
Right.
And we don't want to harm the neighborhood. We want to make sure that the abutters and the people who live nearby don't suffer a loss in quality of life, and they don't suffer an economic loss. And we've thought about all of these things. We've come up with solutions, and that's the purpose of us coming in front of the planning board to show these solutions, and so that people can see the facts and that they can be vetted and well vetted, by not just take our word, but the town actually has the opportunity to hire experts to review these solutions. And if they find a flaw, something we haven't thought of, then that gives us the opportunity to correct it and say, gee, that may be a good idea. Let's try that instead.
But the benefits to the community. In any government, the basic need is revenue. Any government. You got a fire department, a police department, schools, et cetera, et cetera. And the benefit to the community is going to be through the process that's already stipulated and laid out, where the town will receive financial benefit.
But it's more than that. The town will receive tax revenues, will receive development fees. It's quite substantial, but also jobs. Part of our agreement with Charlton is to hire people from Charlton first. So that's actually a forward obligation. That's something we've agreed to. So we need to hire and post our jobs, whether they be security, transport, tradesmen. We need plumbers, electricians, machine operators, HVAC men or women. We need people who are horticultural technicians and experts. These people some of these jobs don't exist today. They need to be trained. So one of the things Harry has done is that he has actually set up training programs for horticultural facilities. So Harry will be responsible for training everyone on how to grow and how to do this, and they'll be reporting to him, but Harry can't do it all. So,
Well, I mean, and jobs is very, and jobs are very, very, very important to a community. And so even in the building process, look at the jobs that will bring to the community.
Right. So in terms of some of the jobs, these are highly trained individuals. So these are not minimum wage jobs. These are livable wage jobs with benefits, with insurance, with vacation, with pension. They're well-paying jobs and positions. If somebody's running automation equipment for us, they may be doing the work of 50 people or 100 people that's being done in the that was being done in the illegal industry.
Right.
So that labor savings, I now have a skilled employee. I need that person.
Yeah.
And that team of people who can operate the machines, maintain the equipment, and these people have to they're well paid. At one point farming was a guy with a plow and an ox.
Yeah.
But we've come a long way since then. And farming today, agriculture today, doesn't look like agriculture of the Revolutionary War.
No.
On the other hand, that doesn't mean it's not farming. And that doesn't mean it's not agriculture.
No.
Agriculture is the process of growing a plant.
That's right.
To eat it, to make a medicine out of it, to make hops for beer,
Right.
or for cannabis. Or just a plant like an orchid to look at.
Right.
Because it's beautiful. That's agriculture. So, there's been some concern is we're manufacturing. Then there's no such thing as agriculture anymore, because modern agriculture, this is what modern agriculture is.
That's right.
And
So that the confusion over agriculture / manufacturing, it's a simple situation. In that what you're really saying is that agriculture has in fact become manufacturing.
well, I don't know. You could argue that agriculture was the earliest form of manufacturing, I guess.
Yeah.
But if you're growing current definitions are, if you're growing a plant, it's agriculture.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I've looked at in hearing these things is someone saying, well, they're manufacturing. Well, if you take something, and I imagine it's a seed, and you put it in dirt, and you water it, it grows. If that's what it is, then that's agriculture in its simplest form. I mean, there it is.
Right. We're growing plants.
Yeah, growing
If
plants.
that's not agriculture, I don't know what is.
Right.
Now, there is a concept of associated use. So, if somebody has a vineyard and they're growing grapes and they're making wine, that's an associated use for agriculture.
Yeah.
That's allowed. In other words, if somebody was to come in and want to set up a winemaking facility without a vineyard attached, then that's a slightly different regulation because
Yeah.
they may be taking grapes from 50 different locations. But what we're doing is we're not taking anything from any other location. Everything on site is being processed on site. Part of that state regulation. It's kind of hard to move this stuff around with some of the state regs, and it's much easier to manage and handle and safer and purer and cleaner to manage on site.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, at one point, Charlton Orchards had a winery.
Yes, it did.
So they was right on site.
Right, right. You know, there's been discussion about our power plant, and I was having a discussion today about that with someone. In fact, the idea is we'll actually be helping the power supply in Charlton for several reasons. One reason is we're actually going to be exporting electricity out to the grid. We have excess electricity. We need the heat and the CO2.
Yeah.
So we use a lot of the electricity, but we'll be able to export electricity out to the grid. That will improve grid reliability. And it'll improve electric reliability for the town of Charlton. If any other of the power plants go down,
Right.
ours is coming in at sort of a lower voltage level.
Right.
I think will be helpful for supply
Well,
here.
the other thing too is, I always, my years I was a town moderator, I was chairman of a finance committee, I'm involved in the Board of Assessors. And one of the things I look at is you talk about tax revenue. And I always used to tell people that certain tax revenue is what I would call unencumbered tax revenue. And they'd look at me, what do you mean by unencumbered? Well, if somebody builds a house and we tax that house and they got 3 kids, they have to go to our schools. Streets got to be plowed. So the tax revenue is encumbered. In your situation, any tax revenue that the town of Charlton gets is unencumbered tax revenue. You're not going to send anybody to school. You don't have to. We don't have to plow your driveway. We don't have to light your property. So it's unencumbered tax revenue, which is what a lot of businesses, in many communities, supply to a community. It's unencumbered tax revenue, and people need to understand what that really means. That means every cent comes right to the town.
Right. So most towns are looking for commercial revenue, revenue from industry, revenue from businesses, for the very reasons you described. Our tax revenue. So we've agreed. There's some interesting. So the way we're being taxed is based on we wanted to clearly define the space that we're being taxed on. So it's actually what we call mature canopy space. So the facility is 1 million feet, and we're being taxed on mature cultivation space, which is 600,000 of the million. 400,000 is ancillary. So our development agreement is $4 a foot for the 600,000 feet. So 600,000 times 4 is 2.4 million. So that's 2.4 million year one, increasing at 2.5% per year. That's a development agreement. The second part is what's our tax rate? So there was concerns, and I've heard stories, well, 61A, and they have abatements, and they have to pay taxes. That's not true at all. Part of our agreement is we've agreed not to exercise the 61A property tax exclusions. And in fact, our minimum property tax is $100 a square foot. So this is a $100 million project. Charlton's tax rate is 1.35, so we're starting off at a minimum taxable rate of 1.35 million. We're probably going to be closer to 150 million investment. Not sure of the exact number, but it'll probably be closer to 150 million. And so that comes out to about 2 million in taxes. So we have about 2 million in taxes, 2.4 million in development. So that's 4.4 million into a town which has a budget of under 30.
Yeah.
The town budget is around 29. So it's a good source of new revenue.
It's an excellent source of.
Right.
And think of how many houses or how many even small businesses would have to be built to equate to that kind of money.
Well, but the difference in houses are
It's incumbent revenue.
Each of those houses is sending 3 kids to school
Yeah.
or 2 kids to school, and while that's a wonderful thing, the kids
Yeah.
go to school.
Yeah.
You know, in fact, the taxes will not offset that school cost.
That's right.
So without an industry to support, this, without a tax base, and by the way, we're probably paying among the highest in the state. Now, understand that I know a lot of developers have complained about this. When we sat down to negotiate the agreements, our feeling is that we wanted to be in a community that has good schools,
Yeah.
has a good police force, has a good fire department, provides good public and community services. So I have no issue with paying taxes. Our business can afford it, can sustain it. We want to be valued at the community to value us, and the best way for the community to value us is to pay our fair share. So we were not looking for any exemptions. We said, listen, this is a good business and we want to be there. We want to improve the community. We have people that are going to want to live in this community and work in our facility.
Yep.
And we want this to be a good home for them. We want the people who move here and come here to feel comfortable moving into a community where they feel there's good fire and police protection, there's good municipal services,
Well, it's also,
and most importantly, the schools are good.
First of all, it's the beauty of Charlton. It's the second largest town by space in the Commonwealth. That's 45 square miles big. It's a huge community. We have the Mass Turnpike goes right through us. We have Route 20. We have a great location. We're in the center of the community of the Commonwealth,
Right.
really, and it's a great community. We have 8 or 9 lakes, that people enjoy in the summer, and
I was here over the weekend. I was here on Labor Day, and I was here with my nephew and his Mike. Unfortunately, I was too old to enter the frog jumping contest.
okay,
The age
right.
cutoff is 14.
Oh, okay.
So I was looking for kids under 14. So my nephew came from New York, and we had 2 frogs, and we entered into the frog jumping contest.
Great.
I was looking forward to this for months, by the way.
Okay.
And next year, hopefully, we'll do better.
Well, no, but I mean,
I'm going to start training those frogs now.
You got to train them now so they can really jump.
Really, next year it's going to be hard to beat us.
I was at Rotary at Sturbridge one time, and one of the interesting things, they have over in Brimfield, they have an event, and every year they have a frog jumping contest.
In Brimfield?
Well, a little kid won. So one of our district governors was coming who loved frogs. Well, unannounced to her when she got there, our new district governor, I had the kid come and bring his frog. And because she liked little play frogs, stuffed frogs and so forth. Well, I brought this little fella about 10 years old, and he takes the frog out of the box, and I said, now let him go. And you ought to see that guy go. Whoa, what a jump. Yeah. And he had won over in Brimfield, so we had the kid come. But
when I was
whole home day was a great day.
It's great. It's a great community. When I was 10 years old, my summer camp, I lived in Brooklyn. I grew up in Brooklyn, so we'd go to summer camp, and they had a frog catching, and I actually won the camp award when I was 10. Yeah. I think they made it. I think now looking back on it, at the time I was so proud of it. But I think they may have made it up for me because they were just looking for an award. They gave every kid an award.
They got something.
They had to give something for me. I wasn't the best in baseball or soccer or football.
No,
I could do all that.
But could you catch a frog?
Yeah, I like to catch frogs, and so I won the award when I was 10. It was probably a default prize, but
I way back. Remember yo-yos? They used to have Duncan yo-yos when I was a kid.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I grew up in Malden, and I won the. They used to have a fella come around and show you how to walk the dog and all those things. Well, I won the.
Cats in the
I won
Cradle
the
and-
Ferryway Green, yo-yo contest one
Nice.
year, and I got a diamond yo-yo. I mean, it was 4 little pieces of glass, but that was my prize, and I thought I was the greatest thing since the pop-up toaster. I mean, I tell you, I showed that yo-yo, so I'm delighted that you won the frog contest.
No, I didn't. That was in camp when I was 10.
Yeah, that's
Here
all right.
in Charlton,
No, that's
I
what
have
mean.
to wait till next year.
In camp when you were 10, you got the award for catching the best frog. So, you're all set.
So I think what us coming to town means economically for the town is several things, but it goes beyond even the orchard. So, there were some questions last night that about R&D and research and development. So what the economic opportunity is, it's not just unencumbered revenue to the town, but it's also jobs and good quality jobs for people. That helps improve housing values. If families are moving into town, that means if people are selling a house or selling a lot, there's now a family who wants to live in town and to raise their family here and to buy that house or purchase that lot. But even more and beyond that, there's other businesses that want to be next to us.
Oh, it's going to attract.
So what I wanted to talk specifically about, and there was some lack of clarity about this last night at the R&D, about R&D. So, and it wasn't, there was a question asked last night at the planning board, is there going to be R&D at the site? When we think about R&D, research and development, we think about three things. There are three main categories of R&D that we look at. One category is actually horticultural R&D. And one doesn't do horticultural R&D on a factory floor, or a greenhouse floor. That's not where R&D and horticultural R&D is done. It's done in a very closed environment, in a small space, a small lab, to understand what are the optimal growing conditions. And there's a tremendous need for this in cannabis. Because everything is anecdotal, there's very little data. The second is type of R&D. So that's really early stage, needs to be done right away. But our site is not necessarily where the initial R&D is going to be done, but it is a very important beta site. Because what happens is we take the R&D out of the lab, we need to install it somewhere, to test it somewhere for scale, and does it work? It might work in a 5x5 grow chamber. Does it work on a 10,000 foot, greenhouse floor?
Right.
And so our facility needs to be adjacent, is the beta testing site for the R&D. So to say that there's no R&D at the site, that's not exactly correct. It was too difficult to explain last night at the planning board. It was not really the appropriate venue for that. But I would certainly welcome the opportunity to discuss it further. But so it's really the institution of taking horticultural R&D that's close to, because those same scientists who are doing the studies in the lab, they need to be able to come across the street or go down the block from the industrial zone where R&D facilities are properly zoned, to be able to come over and see how it's being implemented. And is that happening? So R&D wants to be close to our beta type facility.
Right.
The second type of R&D we need to do is impairment R&D. So there's a tremendous need to understand what is the impairment associated with cannabis. We don't really know. We are using currently a lot of the regulations for alcohol, but it's a very different substance. And we don't understand what it means to be impaired from cannabis. We have some basic idea, but it's not well understood. So we have an interest in studying, and groups are interested in working with us, several different university groups in Israel and here in Massachusetts, and several private companies. So we have one company that can, for example, one of the problems the police have is they measure THC. That THC level is going to be positive for a month in somebody who used cannabis. What does that mean, a positive THC level? So we have a scientist in Israel who has identified not just THC, but all of the metabolites of THC biochemically. And we have another company that can measure, just have to meter, that can simultaneously measure those metabolites, THC level and the metabolites. What we can then do is profile, and looking at the metabolites of the THC and the THC level, timestamp when somebody used THC. Was it an hour, a day, a week, or a month ago?
Wow.
Very, very important. Now we have to understand is what is it, so can we correlate that with some type of physical impairment? So we have a company called Rebion, which is we have a Massachusetts-based company that has actually developed a meter for kids with strabismus. It's a retinal scanner. And this meter is really as a scanner. It was used to detect strabismus or lazy eye in kids.
Yeah.
And really a very quick screen can detect it so the kids can get treated at a very early age. If it's not detected, the kids wind up losing function of the eye.
Right.
So this is a meter that also may be useful for detecting impairment. We don't know. We need to do the research. But if we can now correlate THC levels and metabolite levels with pupil reactivity and retinal reactivity, now we have actually a muscular physical impairment measurement associated with a THC level. But there's something else that's needed. So now we can say, okay, we can look at a pupil. A policeman has something,
Yeah.
you can do a retinal scan. It's not
Yeah.
invasive on the field. Oh, yep, you're impaired, all right.
Yeah.
Bring you back into the station. There's a meter. Either take a little bit of blood or saliva. We can timestamp when the person used it. And then, but what does that mean? So now we're talking about driving, which is concerned. But what about your airline pilot?
Oh,
Or your
it's
neurosurgeon.
endless. Yeah.
Or your neurosurgeon. So basically, the skill set for the guy working, putting asphalt down, might be different than the guy flying a 747.
Yeah.
And
With
if-
300 people on.
And right now, is the pilot impaired if he used cannabis? We would all agree that if he used cannabis in the past 6 hours, he's probably impaired.
Right.
But what if he used it 2 days ago? Is he impaired or not? Yeah. And I would venture to say that if the pilot, and the answer is we don't know.
We don't know.
But if we did know, and in fact the pilot was impaired, my guess is not only would there be regulations to test this, but most pilots would not want to do something to endanger themselves and their passengers.
No.
Or the neurosurgeon, or any profession.
Right.
Or occupation. So what we need is, then there's a tremendous opportunity for occupation-specific impairment testing.
Right.
Not just
No,
for drivers.
and
it's
you
a
know-
tremendous, and this type of research, this would be done here in Charlton. We have an interest in, these companies want to come and be with us and near us. And while we would not be doing the R&D at Charlton Orchard, we would be doing them here. Our preference is to try to set up the research institute here in Charlton,
Right.
where these type of tests and studies would be happening. You know, in a way, it was kind of a double-edged sword question, that whatever answer we gave was wrong. If we
Yeah.
said no to R&D on the site, the answer is, you lied.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if we said yes, more traffic.
Yeah.
And you're not zoned for it. What are you thinking? So,
Well, no,
so
no.
there was no answer that we
No.
could have given to that question that would have satisfied
Five people.
that would have had a nice. But the truth is, the answer is yes, we will do. Yes, we will do. We do hope to do R&D here in Charlton. No, we do not plan to do it on Charlton Orchard site.
Right.
But rather, the answer is in close proximity.
But,
The
but
fin-
it's
the
additional
final-
businesses.
The final set of R&D is longer range, and that's much more exciting. That's the most exciting, and that's the medical R&D. So what we know about cannabis is that this is an incredibly bioactive molecule. This molecule, when we look at the psychoactive effect, think of the psychoactive effect as it works on a small area of the brain that creates a pleasurable sensation for people, so people like that. But in fact, the reason it works, and it's a very potent effect, but there's many other molecules within the cannabis plant, probably at least over 150, and many of these are also bioactive in different ways. They may not be bioactive in this small pleasure center, but they may have also very potent effects within the body. They will, for example, the immune system, which is of interest to me, there are molecules that upregulate and downregulate different parts of the immune system. So depending on, and we don't fully understand what these effects are, there's molecules that affect seizure activity, there's molecules that affect cardiac function, blood pressure, kidney function, breathing, respiratory function, asthma. It's incredible the range of bioactive effects. And understand that many of these bioactive effects are not psychoactive. They don't make somebody stoned. They don't make somebody high. So, in Israel, cannabis has been used for pain control for many, many years. And I'm an oncologist.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a great story. So I started working in Israel. We moved to Israel in beginning of 2013, the end of 2012, and first week of the new year, and starting, with one of the residents. And I'm the residency director. I'm the first residency director for radiation oncology, and we're seeing patients together. And it's to the end of the first week, and we see a woman, and she had, unfortunately, very incurable cancer, and it was in her bones, and I knew this woman had to be suffering. And I'm looking at her med list, and that's in English, and I'm seeing she's taking almost no narcotics. Now, as an oncologist, radiation oncologist, I had lots of patients with cancer. These were sick people with real pain.
Yeah.
I wrote narcotics all day long. And I know this woman should have had 10 times the amount of narcotics she was taking. So I'm kind of a little confused. So I said to the resident, and I'd seen several patients like this during the week, and I'm talking with a resident who fortunately went into another field. And I said to her, Matal, I said, what is it with Israelis? You guys are so tough and strong and impervious to pain. She looks at me and says, Goldstein, what are you talking about? I says, look, Mrs. Cohn here. Yeah. She has she's using one Percocet at night. She's not, I know this woman is suffering. We saw the x-rays and the films. And she says, of course she's taking pain medicine. Can't you read? I said, no, the chart's in Hebrew. I don't see any pain somewhere else. She says, yes, here, look, she's using cannabis. And in Israel, I wrote literally 1/10 of the narcotics I did in the US. Patients would come in, they had one doctor who was prescribing cannabis. They would give patients the option. Most patients preferred cannabis. Didn't cause constipation, didn't cause nausea or vomiting. It didn't suppress the appetite, didn't cause skin itching. You could give them preparations that were not psychoactive.
Wow.
It helped with sleeping. Wow. And their appetite improved. And nobody's had problems stopping breathing.
Wow.
So it was a fantastic drug, and people were using it. And so if the choice was, no, we don't want to give them cannabis because they're going to use narcotics. Well, I was giving everybody narcotics, and in fact, the cannabis works better. Yeah. And for many people, was a better medicine with many fewer side effects. And these were patients at the end of their life. Yeah. So it really, impressed upon me that, and we had preparations that would be intoxicating, that were psychoactive, some that weren't. Wow. So it's very, very exciting. And I think my guess is, if I was to predict 15 years from now, we'll have 10, 15, 20 major medications in a variety of diseases that are based on cannabinoids. Wow. That are helping people. And we want to do that research here in Charlton.
Great, great. Listen, it's been fabulous. It's been a great program. You got to come back. We got to do more of these.
Thank you. I have other members.
Because some of the things you've shared with us, you just sit back and go, wow, wow. And I think that's unbelievable. So we got to have you come back, and we'll set up a program. And Harry, it was great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Have a good trip home.
Yes.
And it's delighted that you're working with Dr. Goldstein.
Fabulous.
That'll be great. And there you are, folks. That's another Conversations With.